Welcome on behalf of the College of Management, and to say how grateful we are to Mr. Dennis Blender, Plant Moran, and Mr. John Beebe, who have made this and previous events possible. Before I give the floor to Mr. John Beebe, I would like to recognize our Provost, Dr. Maria Vaz, and my dear colleagues from College of Management, Dr. Jackie Stavros, Dr. Patty Castelli, Dr. Justin Koo, Dr. Zhang, Ms. Mina Gina. If I've left anyone else, I apologize. Welcome. John.
Morning, everybody. I'm John Beebe with Plant Moran. I head up the firm's not-for-profit practice, and I have the distinct pleasure today of introducing our speaker, Chris Oster from General Motors. Chris is the Global Executive Director of Talent Development, and she's been in that position since 2010. In that role, she has a responsibility for global leadership development, and she's been building a new leader approach to bolster the leader body skills and capabilities. So hopefully she'll be able to tell us what exactly that means when she's speaking to us. Before that position, she was responsible for global change management and organizational development for General Motors. She was born and raised in upstate New York and joined GM in 1995. Before joining GM, she worked at AT&T in a variety of management development roles as well. She has also taught communications and American Sign Language courses at the National Technical Institute for the Deaf and Michigan State University in their College of Communications. She's certified in various coaching and development tools, techniques, and instruments. She received her bachelor's degree in social work and business administration from Rochester Institute of Technology, and she has a master's of science degree in labor and industrial relations from Michigan State University. One last item, under Chris's leadership, GM has created several award-winning programs for an employee career development process and executive coaching internal certification. So if you would please join me in welcoming Chris Oster.
When you're on this stage, it was everything I can do not to come in singing a song. I feel like a middle school play is about to go on, and if you hear some banging up top periodically, they're working on the talent pipeline, I guess, but there's actually some construction going on. So if it gets in our way, we'll deal with it. So I was actually kind of nervous for a couple of reasons about coming to speak to you, and I speak a lot. I don't know what it is about you that made me scared. But I think part of it was about 8 months ago, Dennis Blender gave me a call and said, hey, would you speak to this group? And it was like, yeah, Dennis, I'm running out. Fine, whatever, let's put it on the calendar. And then about mid-January, it dawned on me, I told Dennis I would speak someplace. Who was it to and what was it about? And I caught him on a Sunday, or I guess it was Friday afternoon, and I said, who am I talking to? And he said, well, CEOs of not-for-profits. And I got off the phone, we were driving up north, and I said to my husband, I said, I'm really in trouble. I've been on 2 boards. What do I know really, though, about not-for-profits? And I have you guys on pedestals, by the way. That might feel good for you. And I thought, well, I better prepare to see if my perspective around planning and succession, oh, by the way, he said planning and succession. I was like, oh, I thought it was leadership development. I can do that one in my sleep. But no. So I actually prepared for you. This is a rare thing, and you should be grateful, by the way. You'll even see, my graphics guy did really cute graphics for you, so the whole thing. So as I prepared today, I really love that he picked such a cute person. And Gugob's younger than I am. These were some of the thoughts I had about this. So it was kind of like, why did I say yes? I haven't seen him in years. Why would they want to hear from me? What the heck do I know about their business? Will they think, yeah, right, big company, lots of rich resources, what do we have in common? Or will they say, for God's sakes, last month we had Shinola, I hear you had Zingerman's, and I am not Oprah, I do not have a car for each of you. And then, I hope they're as worried about the talent shortage as I am, because we can bond about that. And then finally, they're from nonprofits. They're probably nice people. So are you nice people? I'm kind of counting on that. So this is, if you've ever done a left-hand column exercise, like, what I said, but what I was thinking, that was kind of like my left-hand column. So I did call 5 of you, and I asked, how does what I do compare to what you do? How is not-for-profits and issues around planning and succession the same or different from a corporation? And this is kind of what I learned, is that, probably have a lot of similarities, have some differences, but we could learn from each other. So I thought, well, I won't back out, is what I decided. I was coming up with all sorts of interesting excuses. I have to go to Germany, been compelled to go to China, and then I decided just to be honest and come. So how are we the same? So here's some thoughts from me on how we might be the same. We're all competing for talent. Whether we realize it or not, we're all in a competition. We all have to work to retain talent, and sometimes we run hot and cold on that. Just do the work, please, and I'll care about you later. We're facing a changing workforce dynamic. I mean, we talk a lot about millennials, but we have 4 generations in the workplace. We've never had that. So how do we appeal to all, I think, is the challenge. I don't know about you, but I'm still not doing as much as we're doing now under Mary Barra's direction. By the way, she is the real deal. We are not doing enough to foster talent. Does anybody feel like they're doing enough? Raise your hand if you feel like you're doing enough to foster talent in your organization. Because we were going to swap seats if that was the case. I don't think we adequately, Plant Moran might, but I think most companies, and I don't know about your own organizations, don't adequately involve or engage our team members in the process, so they don't know what's going on either. We lack sufficient resources for scale. It's recommended that 1% of revenue be used for development. Anybody hitting that, do you think? 1%? Yeah. We're not. That would be a huge amount of money at General Motors. I wouldn't even know how to spend that much money, quite frankly. But that's what the research says we should be reinvesting. And it doesn't sound like that much. And it's 4 to 5%, sometimes top firms, 7% will invest in R&D. And so that's kind of interesting. So 1% of revenue should be rebalancing our workforce. There's just not enough hours in the day, would you agree, to focus on planning and succession versus achieving your mission, getting the work done, hosting the event, counseling the clients, writing the grants. And so those things all tend to go first. So that daily mission and the work wins out over the longer range activities or efforts that we should be engaged in. And then I think, at least I'm a little bit tired of the same old approaches to development. But by the way, I am not a geek. I don't love technology solutions. I think an open source education is important, but it's not everything. And I think especially in your business, the touch is very important. In my business, even the engineers actually want to get together and see each other, which is kind of rare. So that's how I think we might be the same. So we've got kind of the same universal dilemma. I recognize I've got some other things that are a little bit different. Our scale is different. We're supposed to be covering 8,000 people leaders. Not happening, but that's our goal. Resources might be quite different. Even though we don't have enough, mine are probably more stable. I'm not restricted when I write a grant what I can spend the money on. When I get the budget, I can deploy it for the best purpose. I don't have legal requirements there, and I don't have a board, quite frankly, that can be both helpful and questioning. We don't select and assimilate board members. You have to do that, and that I know is challenging. And we don't have to manage founders' issues. Any founders in the room? Any founders of their not-for-profit? Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's like being an entrepreneur and passing on your baby and letting the mission or the vision, morph, or is there somebody here to catch when I exit? So I think there are some differences, but in spite of the differences, I decided to focus on the similarities and see what we could do to learn together today. Brought in a couple of slides because I think this all comes down to it's a war for talent, and we've lost. If we are management and they are talent, the numbers have beat us. There are 3 jobs available for every new college graduate with a computer science program degree. Now, this is obviously my shtick. You're not caring so much, but you might need an IT guy, and you're not for profit. And now you're competing with me, and I can't compete with Ford, or I can't compete, heck, with Ford, HP. I can't compete with Google. I can't compete with all the startups in San Francisco, though we're trying. It's tough. So there's 17 openings for every electrical engineer. I don't know what your data set is, but it has to be roughly the same because we're all pulling from the same pool. So we have 5.6 million job openings in the United States with the lowest unemployment ever. Yay, yay. So I hope you're seeing your contributions going up. But it's a real dilemma, and the average tenure of those little millennials that we're hiring is 2.6 years. Does that resonate with anybody that they're experiencing some of this? Shake your head. Thank you. You do that well, even if you don't agree. So we're kind of all in the same boat, though our skill sets may vary, that we have this dynamic of a shortage. You know, they told us it was coming for years, right? The war for talent, the war for talent. And it's funny, when you're looking for a job, it seems impossible. When you're looking to hire a resource, it seems impossible. I don't know what it is. It's just an interesting dynamic. So this is some of the challenge that we have. So, you know, kind of the big picture is in the past decade, the working age population outgrew the retirement age. So we had enough folks. In this next decade, as rough as it seems like right this minute, it's going to get tougher. It's going to get tougher because the population growth and the exiting growth are, you know, the supply and demand is intersecting. So the question really is, will there be enough talent to both keep the lights on and the water running? So that kind of frames for us a little bit of the challenge around planning and succession. And so now we can forget about all the stats. We're done with that. So I'd like to have a chance for you to talk, and I would change the subtitle if I thought to do it. You know, is my organization ready? Am I investing enough? Are there a few gaps I need to address? So we have a quiz for you. There's kind of like no perfect answer. Every organization will be different. And once you individually take it, what I'd like you to do is just kind of gather up, turn to somebody who's relatively close to you, and have a discussion about the not-for-profit that you're here representing. How do you think we're doing on these particular questions? And we have a silly scale for you, because I'm just kind of that kind of person. You know, you give yourself a 1, yikes, I haven't even started to think about this yet. Well, I kind of have a bit of a plan, but it might only be in my head. I have a plan, but dang, where did I put it? I forgot about it. Our plan is good, or we're best in class, which, you know, may or may not be a reasonable goal for you. So it is 10 to 9, or almost 10 to 9. I'm going to be walking around, checking on you, see how the conversations are going, but, you know, we'll probably take about 10 minutes to have this dialogue. All right, quiz time. So I guess I'd ask, could you raise your hand if you feel pretty satisfied with the results of your quiz for the organizations you're involved with? Now, somebody? Nobody? Well, it's a good thing we're here. That's all I have to say. So I did glance at a few and tried to have conversations with different folks and did kind of see that we're all over the map. Where were you highest? Where did you have your highest score? Which question? 4. So key leaders in the organization are aware of the career aspirations of the people who are working or volunteering for the organization. So they're having those kinds of conversations, okay? What was the other one? I heard 3. We have a track record of regular and thoughtful performance reviews for our key positions in management and our key positions in governance. 6. Key leaders are aware of the estimated costs that would be associated with replacing the key positions. So the turnover of talent, which is costly both financially, but also in terms of time. Anybody else? This guy, I think. Knock 3 times if you're on the ceiling if you want to. There's a lot of elements of planning and succession. I was talking with a gentleman over here from Mott, and we're talking about what is the role of performance reviews. And one of the things that we're finding is that no company has actually ever been able to validate that their performance review system actually confirms their profit and their revenue and their performance. So HR tends to vacillate from very soft touch systems, no ratings, all the way over to force ranking with very rigorous methodologies. Google is off the charts in terms of frequency of performance reviews every 2 months, but not with your boss. They rely on a peer system, which most organizations go, wow, that would be kind of weird. There's just all over the map, and so what is the role of performance management in providing insight and wisdom to your planning and succession? So one of the things that I find is that there's a pretty broad range of activities from, the understanding of what the system is to the documentation, whether our internal audience or our external audiences or participants in our process are even aware. So, our fundraisers, our contributors, do they know what our concerns are around talent? So how about if we talk a little bit about what is our kind of common definition? So there's a range of perspectives. One is, historically preparing a few critical moves. So Bob is the CEO of this organization. Who's going to replace Bob? It was as simple as that. So it was key man replacement. And it was mostly focused on risk and continuity of service. The second healthy paragraph, identification and development of potential successors for key positions. So we opened up to it's not just Bob, but it's Bob and the first 4 lines of executives. And systematic process with training. And so we're getting much more holistic. And now we're even seeing that it's planning and succession is going deeper, it's broadening, and it's getting into the professional knowledge required to preserve the organization to ensure its successful future. So looking beyond Bob, looking beyond the first tier of leaders and into the more holistic organization. What skills are we going to need? What professions are part of our makeup? And what are we going to do to foster those? So, what's the best answer, do you think, for your organizations? Where are you? Like, I'd feel good if I just got number 1 under control. Anybody? Yeah, a couple. Identification and development of potential successors for key positions. So I'd like to get the key positions at least under control. Anybody got that one? Okay. And then what about this number 3, broadening and deepening the professional knowledge to preserve your organization? Yeah, that's the one I tend to find people are not kind of thinking as deeply into the organization. So we're going to talk a little bit about the trends in planning and succession. You have all of this in your hard copy. But so I talked to 5 of you about what it's like to be involved in a not-for-profit, and I also talked to my colleagues in the professional communities about what they see as trends in planning and succession. So the focus is shifting to an assessment of talent to seize growth opportunities versus simply being business continuity. Can we go on? Can we manage the risk associated with turnover? So how many of you are using any kind of assessment process as you replace talent? Okay, very few. Why not? Costly? Time consuming? Why do you not assess your talent? Somebody be bold. Free cup of coffee. One shout out, please. Why don't you assess your talent? Yes, in the back.
In my nonprofit world, we're so technical, so
Yeah, no, that's very fair, and I had that on a chart before, is that the mission and the deliverables that you have are so critical to the lives of people. You know, maybe it's you work at Gleaners and it's getting the food out the door, right? Or maybe you work at Mott Children's and it's taking care of patients. And so it's like the thing that can get kind of on the wayside, well, let's just get a body in here. Let's just get them going, and I'm sure they'll pick it up. One of the things that truly is interesting is many of you probably fall into the belief system that what you do is not that hard to learn. That, you know, put somebody in here, they'll pick it up, I did. And what we're finding is that that's not the case. The world has changed enough. Your background, your knowledge, your depth is actually pretty substantial. So pat yourself on the back. And so replacing yourself or the selves in your organization is pretty critical. And you don't not have to spend a ton of money on assessments. I mean, there's gobs of free assessments out on the web. There's ways to do team interviews, successor interviews, but we were finding at General Motors that, you know, people were getting hired with, they interviewed with 1 or 2 people. At Google, you interview with 17 people. Because so much of what they're doing is trying to do a culture match. And, you know, will they fit in? Can they acquire? Did you raise your hand? Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say that when you said you have 17 people that interview with Google, we only have 17 people that work in our project. We don't have
Scale is different.
We don't have an HR person. The HR responsibilities are kind of spread among several people. So, you know, the CEO is the chief development officer, the HR person, the CEO, sometimes the CFO.
So getting 1 interview in is a challenge, let alone 7 or.
We do a couple of them. But what I'm saying is that, you know, smaller scale organizations have, I think, a harder time figuring out how to do all of those things.
Yeah. Has anybody found some ways to do it that you kind of want to share? Yes.
We do it, but we are a little bit different organization at the university. We all have national searches, and we interview for all. Each person that comes in is interviewed by 8 or 9 people. Always.
Yeah, so you find ways to include more people in the process.
And they have to give a presentation, but you know, we are also special. Our university is a little different. Although we are not for profit, is a little different than
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the areas where I found, you know, that I knew we would be very different is scale and focus. So I appreciate that difference. But, you know, thinking about how you can shore up that a little bit stronger is probably not a bad thought. So the pool approach is another trend in planning and succession. So how do we have more than one person in our line of sight so that we aren't just, and I'll share a story, kind of assuming that Bob wants to replace me. So I had an experience not that long ago where I was talking to someone about their development, and I said, well, you know, I will exit General Motors in the next 2 or 3 years, and you know, I think you have a very strong profile to replace me. I thought I was kind of cool throwing that little carrot out there. And the person looked me straight in the face and said, oh, I don't want your job. What? I'm pretty cool. What are you talking about? I make decent money. I influence the system in some ways. You see me. They were like, no. You know, Chris, I'm not sure anybody wants your job. And I was like, what? Anybody? I want to go in like 3 years. There's got to be somebody. And so, you know, we unpacked that a little bit, and it was a woman, and she was making some assumptions about how much I worked and how wired I was all the time and, you know, travel at the drop of a hat, that kind of stuff. And I said, well, that doesn't have to be you. You know, you can reframe this role. I mean, these are the core elements. So yes, you got to you got to have passion for it. You got to be really results driven. But, you know, and it was like, I don't like budgets. I said, I don't like budgets either. That's why I hired Katie to help me with the budgets. Well, I don't like this part of it. I said, I know, that's why I hired Deb to help me with that part of it. So, you know, was eliminating, thinking they had to do it all. So their perspective of the job or what the expectations for the role would be was scaring them off. And I think particularly we've learned from a study we participated in with McKinsey and the Lean In organization, Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, is that women in particular tend to have representing an aspiration gap. And it's pretty well documented if you take a look at the trends. And so they're saying, not sure I want that. And that's fine. I'm fine. Want what you want. Just do it with full knowledge and don't make assumptions that it would be impossible the way you do it. And, it's, people think Mary Barra, and, I've worked for the woman, and she goes home about 6 o'clock every single night, spends hours with her family, and then hooks back up later. And I know her kids, I know her husband, they're all like intact. So don't build it up to be something that it doesn't have to be. So I think sometimes our dialogue with people to show them what the jobs are today doesn't have to be exactly how the jobs are tomorrow, because they will make assumptions, and that's where you get the 2.6 years of exiting. How many of you have seen more quits? I know Gleaners does not have this problem. More turnover of newer talent than you had in the past. Have you seen more people moving on faster? Yeah. Or even worse, they disengage in 2.5 years, but they stay. That's our dynamic. We do a workplace of choice survey, which we just completed last Friday. We had 86% participation rate. We do it globally with 220,000 employees. It's a nightmare. This was the first year we added the hourly in. But last time we did it, in 2014, we found that those that we had hired in had a very high engagement of like 84%. After 2.5 years, it dropped to below the average for the company. And it takes 7 years before they get back to average. Frightening. Now, not all of those are millennials, because it was new hires, but we hire a lot of experienced hires. So we're trying to understand what that data is for us. Do you have some data, by data, it doesn't have to be numbers, observations that say that you need to explore that same kind of thing? What is going on? There's 4 generations in the workplace. Some of it is millennial. Some of it is the environment we're creating. Some of it is the representation of the work that doesn't have to be the way it's going to be forever. How Chris Oster does that job will be different than the person who replaces me. And they should feel that freedom so they don't exclude that opportunity. So in order to get a pool and not just be on replacement planning, you really have to start to kind of create a perspective in your firm of flexibility. That these jobs are not the way they've always been, and particularly for those of you who are founders, they really, I bet, apply that to you. Like, I'm sorry, who are you? Yes?
Arts and Scraps, okay.
Arts and Scraps? Oh, we bought stuff from you for our activities. Yeah, that's so exciting. I love that. But, your first name? Peg. So Peg, people probably think you started that, like that's the mission, right? That will always be the mission and the scope of the work, and if Peg ever leaves, we'll still do it exactly the way Peg did it. Is that how you feel about it?
The organization's a lot bigger than I am.
Good. You're letting it grow? I mean, that's often a very...
27 years, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know you guys have been around that long. That's amazing. But if we as founders don't let the business of our not-for-profit grow, morph, expand, then people think, I can't do anything to alter that course. And so why would I stay? Assimilation of outside talent. When you're hiring people, this may not be as big an issue for you, but can you garner external excellent candidates when you need to? Do you have an employer brand? We know you have a not-for-profit brand, but do you have an employer brand within that structure? What would you say? Do you think you have some of you that are bigger, probably it's a little bit easier. Gleaners, we both went, oh, Gleaners. You've fed people for years and years and years. You've fed scraps to people for years and years, Peg. Arts and Scraps. So you have an employer brand besides what you have with your community brand, whether you kind of realize it or not. You serve clients, they know who you are. Can you recruit from each other? I've heard some rumors when I walked around that we're stealing from each other. I just get you trained and you go elsewhere, and not necessarily not-for-profits, but other companies. And that can feel kind of tiresome if it's rotational. So can we assimilate outside talent? Do we know how to bring them in, especially when we have limited resources? You don't have a department that's going to orient people. You know, you don't have a new employee orientation probably. It's like, there's your seat, if you have a seat, and get to it and follow Marge. She's been here for years. She knows what she's doing. Is that how a lot of you do your training? Come on, shake your heads, we know. We do that like that at GM. Eric joined our team. There's no manual, there's no, it's just like, just jump in here. And evidently the newer population is not so keen on that. So what is our employer brand? Transparency improvement. So how much are we cluing people into what the opportunities will be, where there might be growth, and what do they want? Classically, planning and succession was kind of like behind secret closed doors. And that's just, in this age of transparency, just not working very well. Do you ever go out to Glassdoor? Do you know that website? So Glassdoor is a social media phenomenon where, like, if you're thinking about another job, and I don't know if they have a not-for-profit, I meant to look that up. And so I can go out and see what people said about the employer that I might be interested in. And so it's basically people who work inside the system or exited the system rating the system. So General Motors, they weren't very nice to me, so I left after 2.5 years. I didn't have a clear direction, and so I'm out of there, and I think they paid me $5,000 less than I got at Ford. And so they just like put it all out there. So you're going to recruit, and basically it's how to find a peer review on a company. Does anybody look to see if you are listed in an? Yeah, are you? Yeah? What did it say?
Yes, like the CTO, and said that they like their living life. They were there,
Good.
a couple of years, so it was good. Now I kind of want to research a little bit more.
Yeah, so are we staying in touch with what our employer brand looks like outside of us? And some of us, I saw the faces going, I don't know what that is. I'm sure if I know about open glass door? Glass ceiling. Yeah, glass ceiling is that other thing that I had to bust through to get ahead. Which I always called glass toilet, by the way, because at General Motors, as a woman, you could always get into the restrooms at a conference like that. It was never a big deal. Now we actually have to stand in line, so things are good. But so transparency improvement, because if they're not telling you, they're telling somebody. So it's out on social media someplace what you're like to work for, so that kind of the intersection between your employer brand and transparency. But people, just like the woman that I talked to, I said, would you like to follow in my shoes? And had I not had that dialogue with her, I might have only been pathing her. So the dialogue is really, really important. Managing expectations with slower transitions. I think a number of you have probably seen this also. As we stayed longer in the workforce, the baby boomers, people couldn't come in as fast behind us and move up. So it's like, when will Chris leave? Are you thinking about it, woman? I'm sure there's some people doing that. And so managing expectations of our staffs with slower transition times as leaders stay and work longer. So it's kind of almost the flip side of that. That can limit the growth. We were doing a study a couple years ago, and we were talking about people kept throwing around the term frozen middle. And I assumed I knew what that meant. It was when we communicated direction from the top, and it just kind of never flowed all the way down. It didn't make it through that frozen layer, that middle management layer, and we were doing all sorts of activities to increase the capability of those engineering group managers to communicate direction, to feel like they were, supposed to serve that role. And we were doing a focus group, and I said, so what do you think? Do we have a frozen middle? It was a pretty mixed group of people. And there were some younger in career folks, and they said, oh, we got a frozen middle. I said, so do you feel like you're not getting the direction from the top? They were like, what are you talking about? No, frozen middle means I can't get up. I can't make it through that frozen layer. So sometimes we're having a dialogue that's at cross purposes. We don't even know that we're not talking about the same thing. It was like, how long have I been talking about the frozen middle, designing programs for it, and somebody else meant something totally different. So managing growth expectations, this frozen middle can be kind of not great if you're trying to get ahead. So how do you manage that in your not-for-profit? Your talent ratio target, if believe it or not, they actually are best in class, but 80% of us want to build in-house and will build in-house. We'll spot someone that we think has potential, we'll help to groom them, and that will be successful. 20% of you may go out and purchase or buy your candidates. And what they recommend is that, it's best to have 3 candidates. 2 candidates is better. 1 candidate is good. When you have none, you're in trouble. But can you go out and purchase the resource that you need? Or can you only develop it? Is that the only way for you to get the right kind of talent? And then the other thing that the trends are showing is off-cycle development reviews. Do you have a predictable cadence? In a really small not-for-profit, do you sit down one time a year and talk about how's everybody doing? Are they well suited for their roles? What was their performance review? Where do you see them going next? Where do we think they want to go? And documenting what your successor slates might be for a number of positions. And then at a different time, coming back in and saying, what can we do in terms of development? So we put Betty on that list. And, we recognized she was really good for that job, but she really needed some background in finance. What can we do to help her be more ready to take that role on, where she would need some business acumen, she would need to know how to do a budget, that type of thing. So firms more and more are splitting those 2 pieces, taking a look at performance one time a year and, the successor slate, and then talking about development. But it's really, really about, discipline. And if we can build that into our system, and if you're just trying to get the meals out the door, the kids in the building, get companies in to look at what you have to offer, to get financial support, that can be very difficult. And unfortunately, it's kind of like working out. There's nobody that can do it for you except for you. So what I would really hope is that when you're done today, that you would go back and maybe have a dialogue with your colleagues and see where you could go with that. So I want you to take another, and I'll come around and find you if you're trying to talk just to yourself. It looks really awkward if you're just sitting by yourself, talking to yourself. So pair up again and discuss which of these trends do you think you could adopt where you work? Which one seems like, if I had to pick one that I want to work on when I go back, which would it be? I'd want to work on transparency improvement and talking to all my people and making sure that they know what they want and know that the jobs are not so narrowly defined. That's the one that I would go back and work on. What do you want to go back to work on? So let's take another 10 minutes. And ready now. Wow, you guys quiet down well. At work, if I'm running a session with a lot of people and they don't come to order as nicely as you did, I sing the song Feelings. And then they do, because they want me to stop. So I'm glad that you didn't make that happen today. So it seemed like we were having pretty good dialogue. You talk better amongst yourselves than you do with me, by the way. I'm a little worried about that. But I know that many are challenged with I'm from a small not-for-profit, and these ideas seem a little bit big for me. And so those I've joined, we've tried to talk about how do you take nuggets, how do you take little cells from what seems like a bigger organism and try it, whether it's, I could incorporate. We have a librarian here who has her students doing the interviewing in the library service, because they do the job and they give really good opinions, and she's able to then give them the experience of interviewing. And so from a very early stage, they get the concept of talent development, because they're going to hire. I always tell my team, listen, you're hiring your playmates. So pick people that you want to count on, pick people that are going to be fun to work with, that when you're slogging through the hard stuff, this is somebody I want to work with. And so, just if you can take just small nuggets, I think that's true of any learning adventure that we engage in. What one little thing can I do? So the last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I think in your chart it says economic development, and I realized it should have been economical, but all the time I just wanted to say cheap. So I changed it to cheap this morning. What are some ideas for cheap development? Because we're all looking for a deal. I'm sure there was a classier way to put it. But so what are we doing, to develop? And so here were a few things that I wanted to offer that I think could work, and maybe you can steal one of these. Short-term talent swaps. If I'm at Mott and you're at United Way, and we both got these really bright people, why don't we swap them for a week or two or a day and let them see how somebody else runs? No cost. You've made friends. Maybe you've already started the nugget of, oh, I wonder if we could do that. And for a day, it might be you first. Maybe you want it to be you first. A plan for every person is what we call it. Devise a stretch component for each of your leaders, your employees, however you perceive it. Let them run your board meeting. Let them speak on behalf of the agency. Let them take the first crack at writing the grant. They won't learn it until they try it. They won't learn it until they do it. Sometimes we have to let go a little bit to see if they can do something a little bit more than we think they can do. So thinking about a stretch component for anybody that you kind of are looking at going, I want to develop this person. This person has potential. I mean, start off with one, start off with two, whatever makes sense for your scale or size of organization. Charter an action learning effort. Now this maybe like Dennis could help to broker or something. But could we identify a shared concern that we have here in the community? And establish a group of your more high potential talent or your talented folks and let them solve a problem. Let them generate options, let them generate solutions, and report out to a few CEOs or a few board members so that they're practicing their skills. Maybe they're solving a problem that we all have together. Maybe, we're all finding if we're in agencies that are membership-based, like membership's dropping. So why is membership dropping? What could we do about that? Or many of us have an issue of how do we onboard board members? So could we get together and solve that problem? Or could we let our people get together and think about that and then report out to you so that they're also practicing the art of delivery? So what could we do to charter some action learning across ourselves? Coaching. There are some folks in the neighborhoods here who are recognized coaching resources. SHRM, ICF, Oakland University, I don't know about Lawrence, but Wayne. Could we reach out and say, hey, I've got some young staff to develop. You're training people to be coaches. Could my person be your client? Could I get some free services that way? Open source education, there's a ton of it out there if you don't know what it is. I mean, it's just like free courses galore. But the challenge is you have to give people time on the job to do some of it. So can you reserve some learning time in the day, in the business that you have? 2 hours a week, 1 hour a week. Start small and have it be, okay, we're going to turn the phones off kind of Wednesday afternoons, 1 to 2, Friday afternoons, 2 to 4. And, we could do a lunch and learn. We could watch a TED Talk together. We could individually listen, we need to get better at how we're writing grants. And so I saw there's a grant tutorial. It's for free, National Science Foundation. How about if you take that one and I'm going to look up this one? So there really are ways to have economical development. And then win a golden ticket. So I still haven't gotten permission to do this, but I think it's going to work out okay, because I think I'm not going to ask for permission. If you leave your business card with me, and maybe Dennis, you can figure out how we capture him in the back, I'm going to pick 5 folks, and I'm going to call you. I'm going to give you a seat in one of our training programs. And so we offer crucial conversations on a regular basis. We have a program called, well, I won't have you do the leading in the new GM. That probably wouldn't really make sense. People Leader Basics, that's very good for supervision. You know, the basics about delegating and such. We periodically offer communications courses, programs for women's in leadership. And so we have about I think 3 or 4 of the classes that will work. And so what I'm going to do is give you the golden ticket, and you're going to pick yourself or pick somebody else, and you're going to come to the Renaissance Center, most likely, because almost all of our courses are there, and it's on a public level, so I don't have to worry about getting you in. And I'm going to ask you that what you hear in Vegas stays in Vegas. So if you hear a couple of our EGMs, our engineering group managers, sound like idiots, I don't want you to go back and say, those people, GM, are idiots. I want you to go back and say, I learned something, and GM gave me a gift today. So I'm going to pick 5, see how that goes. And I'm also going to encourage, some of you are board members and you work for companies like mine. I'm going to ask that you go back to your companies and do the same thing. So if you're here from Ford, you're here from Bosch, you're here from Lear, because you're a board member on one of these fine institutions. Or bring this up at your next board meeting. You know what Chris Oster did? I like that anyway. She's going to, she's on behalf of GM, is going to let our people attend some training. So over the next 6 months, we'll get your folks into a program that would have been cost prohibitive potentially, or at least exposes them to some other ways of thinking. So that is my gift to you. And with that, I'm open for questions for about, I think, 10 minutes, and then you guys all have jobs to do. Is there anybody got a question, or we can do them one-off, face-to-face? Yes? Hold on, we got a microphone.
There you go.
Now you can sing to us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you recommend the type of software, like I believe GM uses the golden version of PeopleSoft? Are there maybe tiered down versions of that helps to track employees and accomplishments and their career paths?
Yeah, I wish I
recommend?
could help you with that kind of question. I'm thinking some of the IT people or some of the folks sitting in the audience may have what are some of the non-heavy systems that are out there. I'm sure they exist. Is there anybody that could help her? Yeah.
Personally, at my organization, I use something called Bamboo HR, and it's very affordable, like per user. So if it's $12 a month if you got 5 people. It allows employees to add information on their own record, as well as for managers to add information. So you can manage performance objectives and reviews, basic information. There's other things out there too, like Zenefits, and if you just do a search for HR software, there's a lot of great, very small but very useful systems out there.
Can you say that name again?
Zenefits and Bamboo HR are the two.
Bamboo jar?
Bamboo HR.
Bamboo HR.
Yep.
Going, what jar? What's that jar?
Yeah,
for?
Bamboo HR is one I use, and it's great. I love it.
Yeah, well, great. See, we can teach each other. Any other questions? All right, I'll be available until 10, and Dennis, raise your hand.
I will take tickets. And John will take tickets over there.
Yeah, so we'll collect your business card. I promise I'll close my eyes. I will not know who I'm picking. Thank you very much.